Hello, welcome to my channel and welcome to this video. Today we are going to be interviewing Hannah Pennington. Did I say your last name correctly?
Yes.
Okay, I have a terrible habit of never checking before we start recording. And then as soon as I hit the record button, I'm like, why didn't I check? So today we're going to be interviewing Hannah Pennington. She is a fantasy author. She comes from Dallas, Texas, and has moved around the country a lot and is currently living in Oklahoma. She started writing at age 7, and that was the beginning of the foundations for her debut trilogy, which we will be talking about. She's passionate about fantasy and allegories, and she dedicates her books to the good Lord. So, all right. And of course, just a reminder to the audience, I'm going to go ahead and have all of Hannah's links, her website, her books, and all of that in the description down below. So be sure, as soon as you're done watching the video or while you're listening to it, to go check out those links and go show her some support, share her stuff on social media, and just help an author out. We love to help an author out. So,
yep.
All right. And without further ado, Hannah, tell us about you and what really got you into writing.
I definitely remember the first inspiration from my book was whenever I was around 7, and aside from writing a bunch of short stories that I would alternate with my best friend down the street, we would swap chapters and build a story. We would drop them off mailboxes.
Yeah.
I had some friends I did that with too. It was so much fun.
I still remember what it was called. I think it was called Kingdom in the Clouds. And it might have been a ripoff of a Barbie movie, but who knows?
Hey, nobody's judging a 7-year-old.
So is your friend writing now still, or is it just you?
It's just me at this point.
Okay, just checking.
Yeah. And for what started my inspiration for my current debut was I had a craft book that has a bunch of simple crafts for, younger ages, and they were like super easy to make, so you could crank out a bunch of them. And there was this one project, it was a little pipe cleaner snake you could stick on the end of your pencil just as like a friend. And I only had black at the time, so I made a black snake out of the pipe cleaner. And I thought it was a little boring, so I took the only construction paper that I had, which was red, and then I gave it some accents, and then I decided to give it wings, and then I had this little black and red dragon that I became obsessed with. It got lost multiple times, so I remade it many times.
and Scalede was born.
Exactly. And then my character Scalede was born, and especially after I watched the first 100 Junior Dragon movie, I was like, well, gosh, now I really need to write a book with this character.
That's great. Oh.
That's awesome. Oh my gosh. I freaking love dragons, so I was so excited. And definitely with your new cover, like, oh my gosh, your new cover.
Oh, it's gorgeous.
Is stunning. I love it.
Thank you.
Yes. What was the inspiration for the cover, this second cover?
Well, it actually took me a long time to figure out how I wanted to lay out the cover, because I'm definitely more film inspired over books, definitely inspiration from both, but I'm more of a movie person when it just comes to how to spend my time. So I got caught in how movie posters are designed rather than how book covers are designed. So I had a big struggle in the beginning trying to translate that to a novel cover, which didn't end up working very well. And I was just trying to figure out what is something that I can tweak 3 times to have a cohesive looking trilogy. And so I was trying to figure out, well, I definitely want to have a cover on the front, because if it's just like really fancy typography, which can be done really beautifully, to me as a reader personally, it doesn't really convey a whole lot. It might tell me the genre, but nothing else. If I see a character on the cover, I'm more likely to look into it. So I wanted to incorporate that, but I also didn't want to use a stock photo. So I'm like, well, at this point, I'll just make it all from scratch myself. So I drew the silhouette, and then I did some heavy photo manipulation on a white iguana, and then got the dragon eye. And
Wow.
so definitely wanted to have a dragon because that's pivotal to the story. So that was going to be a main focus. And then what the main character of the book, or at least one of them. And then that's why I decided to put Melanie in the reflection, where I didn't have to focus a lot on detail. So I could leave enough of the character's face to the reader's imagination, but enough to tell who it was after you read the book, or even before you read the book. Oh, that's a person. So that's kind of what my inspiration and goal was with the cover.
Well, it came out very, very nice. I mean, it's just gorgeous. So, and now you have a background in graphics design, or you're a graphics artist?
I do, yes. I went to Indian Capital Technology Center for an associate's degree in graphic design. So that saved me a ton of money as an indie author, because
Yeah.
I could design everything myself.
I think we should all do that now. I don't know how good we'd be, but yeah, no, what you've done is brilliant, and I really, really love that cover. So, what started this story then? So you were talking about, I mean, I sidetracked you a little bit. You were talking about the pencil cover, and so how did that lead into the actual writing of the story?
Well, it definitely, I wanted to figure out what the backstory of this pipe cleaner dragon was, which obviously turned into a real dragon. And so I was trying to think, well, where did the dragon come from? Because I loved the aspect of having a character in modern times interact with fantasy elements from a parallel world or a world somewhere else, very reminiscent of Narnia, which I absolutely loved growing up. We had the audio dramas that we would listen to on long car rides, and they were just so well done. And I just loved the story and how characters from our world are brought into the fantasy world. So I definitely wanted to include that element, because I couldn't find any books since Narnia that were what I was looking for. And since I couldn't find it, I figured I should just make it myself.
Make it yourself.
Yeah.
Exactly. A true homeschooler fashion right there.
Exactly.
I can make that.
Well, I've been homeschooled my whole life, so it's probably where that comes from.
Yes. Yep. 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 I was homeschooled from K through high, and that was my mom's motto for most of my life. We can make that.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
that's cool.
that's
Yeah.
awesome.
So because I wanted to do kind of like a Narnia portal fantasy, I just took a lot of inspiration from other media that had kind of similar elements. So How to Train Your Dragon, I really like the relationship between Hiccup and Toothless, how they just became really tight. And Toothless wasn't just like an animal, but he had his own like personality, but he didn't speak, which I liked, because I'm not like, depending on how it's done, I'm very rarely impressed with talking animals. It depends on the animal, to be honest, though, and how it's portrayed. 50-50 for me. So I like the fact that you could still see so much of Toothless's personality without giving him dialogue. I found that to be a very well done. I found that to be talented to be able to do that, to show personality without having the character speak. So I liked that. And then I also loved the movie The Water Horse, which
oh my gosh. I don't know very many people who have actually seen that one.
Yes,
So,
same. I tell people about this. I'm like, what is this movie? I'm like, it's an amazing movie, but he finds an egg
good.
and he keeps it. And so I like the part where Angus finds an egg of this mythical creature and raises it from an egg, because at that point it's super like intimate right off the bat with the water horse. So I loved that too. At that point, taking elements from How to Train Your Dragon and from the water horse, I just kind of combined my own character, putting it into modern times and just putting my own spin on it. And then I gave her a brother, the main character, Melanie, I gave her a brother because I figured, having a girl character and a boy character will expand readers like relatability, because I know a lot of my brothers are saying, I don't find many fantasy books with guys as the main character. I'm like, well, I got you covered.
Exactly. And it is hard to find fantasy books too that do focus on like positive family relationships, and definitely like just family relationships, period. It is so hard. And most of
Mhm.
them, the main character, and definitely in young adult, the main character has a tragic backstory where all their family died. And,
Right.
I'm guilty of that. And,
I was just going to
but
say that.
I'm guilty but I mean, even with mine, I still had that little family element of some of the family did survive. He's got to go find them. But it's rare to find an mostly intact family, and definitely positive, with
Mhm.
positive outlook on it.
Yeah.
That was a main mission for my book was, I come from a family that, is intact, nobody's dead. And, you have all of these characters in movies or characters in books where, either the parents are divorced or the parents are dead. And everybody's like, oh, well, if you have divorced parents, that's relatable to me. I'm like, yeah, but what about the people like me who have intact families and want to see positive, fun relationships with the family members? I'm like, well, I'll just do that with my book. So my character does not have dead parents, and she has a really good relationship with her brother. He's not treated
Mhm.
as like the annoying, obnoxious character that everybody likes to snub, like in a lot of comedy movies. I never really
Yep.
liked that. So I'm like, well, I'm just gonna make him and her just overall positive people, and then they have to fight through this crazy turn of events where they're sucked into a fantasy world and really strengthen their sibling bond even further.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I am reading your book now. And I know you know that, the audience might not. Yeah, no, I definitely find that. I definitely find the interactions between the two definitely, it's definitely a tight relationship, and they do have to grow with it, and there's a little bit of sibling things here and there, as is probably is normal, which I found very amusing so far, I will tell you that. But yeah, it does cover it, and I think you do it fairly well between the two, showing both sides of, the brother side and the sister side. So speaking of that, and you were talking about your family, so what do they think of your writing? Are they supportive? Or have they read any of your stuff so far? What's the scoop?
So my family is very supportive, and I'm very lucky and very blessed for that. And they have been very instrumental in my author journey. So my younger brother, he's in the young adult category. And so he read my book when it was like the second draft perhaps.
Mhm.
And even, despite all its flaws that I now see looking back on it, he said that it was one of the best books that he read that year, but I'm sure he's just biased. But the kid reads a lot. I think he's read Ranger's Apprentice, the entire series, which is like 19 books.
Mhm.
I think he read all the books in like 2 or 3 months.
Wow,
So yeah.
that's impressive.
Wow.
So I definitely trust his judgment when it comes to reading books because he has read so many.
Mhm.
And the insight that he actually gave me, because he's so well read in the fantasy genre, he's
Mhm.
able to help me point out certain things that might need to be expanded upon or certain things that will work better for the genre. So he's been an amazing help. And my other brother is very detail oriented. So he'll catch typos and other small things that I've completely become blind to, and also helps me by saying if a fantasy name is too hard to pronounce and if I should tweak it. So, because I definitely want, like, even
Never
with a
happens.
pronunciation guide, I still
Yes.
want them to be able to get by enough with the pronunciation where, like, oh yeah, I can say this. I'm pretty confident that this is how it sounds.
Mhm.
Um, but every so often, there's like one word he's like, oh, you might want to change this. So I changed it,
Mhm.
and but my mom, yeah. So, and my parents were my alpha readers, and they've been a huge help. So my mom helped
Mhm.
catch plot holes and came up with really awesome creative ways to fix them. And my dad is a somewhat of a line editor himself for his job, but more like documents for like companies. So like not fantasy, but he
Right. The technical stuff.
Yeah.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
He was very helpful in reminding me how to say what I want with as few words as possible because
Uh-huh.
my first
Yes.
drafts are extremely wordy. So
that
having
that
No. Oh,
my
that
dad
never
teach-
happens to authors, right?
Yeah, that is something authors definitely struggle with more often than not. And I feel
Mhm.
like, especially fantasy authors, we love to get super descriptive and put
Oh, yeah.
and try to just explain all of the bigness that is in our head. And
Yeah.
that's where as a book coach, I have had to help a lot of young authors start honing in on that. Okay, how can you say all of this in as few words as possible? Because the human brain, when it's reading, it takes description better with fewer words.
Right. And with trying to do it without being an info dump as well.
Yeah.
That was a
That's
big thing that was pointed out in the beginning with my dad. He's like, you know that you're just dumping information. That
Yeah.
So info dumps and the what is it called? As you know, Bob. were also really
Oh,
big
Oh my
ones.
God, I haven't heard that in ages. That's great.
Yeah. So my dad helped a lot in that regard, just teaching me how to say a lot with few words. And he also introduced me to Kill Your Darlings, which was very painful to learn, but a very valuable lesson.
yes, yes, yeah, the things that you feel like you can't live without, but the story actually can.
And yeah.
Oh,
At
that's
that-
the worst part.
At that point, just copy and paste them into a spare document called deleted scenes, and maybe you'll release them in an exclusive newsletter someday.
There you go.
Exactly. Yep.
Or
Yep.
the expanded edition. There you go,
There
right?
you go, expanded
Yep.
edition.
Yep.
Yep.
The sweet
Yep.
little lies we tell ourselves to make it feel better.
Right.
I have been seeing a lot of authors lately who are putting out like special edition books on like Kickstarter and stuff, where
Mhm.
they are including those deleted scenes and stuff. So
Yeah.
and it's like a special edition book that you can only get once. And I think it was Shannon Pemrick who pointed this out to me, and I was like, that's a clever way to put that document to use.
Exactly.
Well,
So,
yeah, no, go ahead.
okay, I was just gonna ask, you've talked a little bit about some of the stuff that you learned as writing, while writing and stuff. What do you feel like is the most surprising thing you learned while writing your book?
There's definitely a lot, but the most surprising thing I learned, I believe, was whenever I finally bought the book, Save the Cat Writes a Novel.
Oh my
And
gosh, that is a lifesaver.
it blew my mind when I first read it, because up until that
Mhm.
point, I was really struggling with my main character. And I was like, why am I having so much fun writing the side characters, but struggling so painfully with the main character? And after reading it, I was realizing that the side characters don't need as much development because they're not the focus. So you don't
Right.
have to put as much energy into structuring their whole arc. You get to focus on just little pieces of who they are. Whereas the main character, you have to put a lot more work in it. And if you're working too hard, you can overwork them or not work them enough, and then they just feel flat. So that was my biggest struggle with my main character, is like, why on earth does she feel flat, and why is she not super fun to write? So
Right.
Yep.
it's like, this is not good, because if I'm not having fun writing it, the audience is going to tell and not have fun reading her. So I
Yes.
need to fix it. So after reading Save the Cat was basically a complete eye opener, and basically explaining that the character needed to have like a thematic growth. So like there's like an outward growth and then like the interior growth. And I did not
Mhm.
have that second part. So once I figured out what type of like virtue or whatever that she was going to be working through, it really fleshed her out. And then I could just build upon that, build upon that. So then afterwards, she became so much more fun to write, because she was just missing that piece. So I would suggest that if anybody's writing a book, get Save the Cat Writes a Novel, because it saved my manuscript and my main character, which is kind of important.
A
Right.
little bit, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Character arcs are definitely the biggest thing that I learned, is basically fleshing out your main character, or pretty much any character, however many you want to have arcs.
Mhm.
Definitely give them more than struggling with the main plot. Give them an interior struggle with like identity, or any sort of like, perhaps they don't trust people, or perhaps they have a fear of the dark or some sort of internal struggle that they have to face that is resolved through the main plot as well, is what I learned. And
Yeah.
I really enjoyed learning that.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. That deep, complex struggle that the character needs to go through. And then if you're really like stepping back from the book and picking it apart, you realize, okay, well, this over here is the main plot, but then this was the actual battle that the main character had to go through. And it just helps you give that character so much more depth. It helps you also put in some amazing underlying lessons for the reader that they don't know they're going to pick up and learn as they're reading about dragons and stuff.
Right.
And
Because
I
think
love
that's
that.
the main thing. That's the main thing that I think readers will actually identify with and relate to, because they're not going to be able to relate to the fact, oh, they're having this big battle with swords and shields, but they are going to relate to a character having trust issues. And that makes the character feel more real, and they're going to be more attached to them because they have that bit of common ground to relate to. And if you don't have that, it's going to be harder for the reader to like the character.
No.
Yeah.
I was going to say, being that we're talking about this, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about Melanie and Jason, and if they're based on any people in particular, why don't you include that?
Well, Melanie was originally actually called Catherine when I was like 8, and then I heard the name Melanie, and I was like, oh, that actually sounds nicer. So name change.
Sorry, Catherine.
I'm used to it at this point.
And a little bit of trivia: her last name Walden's was a play on Walden Media, which is the studio that released the movie versions of Chronicles of Narnia. So I was like, oh,
Okay,
That's
so
fun.
that's cute.
And so Melanie was definitely based off of me in the very beginning. And this character has been worked through many different times over the years. And she's definitely changed where she's less like me. The only similarities that we have are probably just appearance. So brown hair, brown eyes. That's pretty much it. But
Okay.
Melanie has been moving around the country for a long time because she is a daughter of a Marine Corps sergeant. And so she doesn't really have a lot of friends. So therefore she has a lot of time, has a hard time, hard with words here. She has a hard time making friends because she just never stayed in one place long enough to make those sort of connections. So when she's finally able to plant roots, when her dad gets a different job, she is struggling a lot. And then the inciting incident happens where she now has a dragon to keep secret. So now she can't even make friends if she wanted to. And that's a big interior struggle with her that she must learn to overcome and learn to trust throughout the course of the book, among many other obstacles.
Yes. Some outward, some inward.
Yes. And her brother Jason is 2 years younger, and he was never really based off of anybody real. He was kind of a mishmash of various comedic characters that I read in the middle grade young adult genre, that I just loved the way that they were written, just their humor. They were just super enjoyable to read. So I definitely wanted to bring the comedy element expressed through his character. And so he is less conflicted than Melanie, because he happens to just play video games to keep his friendships alive over the internet and video game chat rooms. And he's just kind of going through the motions, just kind of a laid back kind of guy for the most part. Till he and Melanie are thrown into this fantasy world, and he realizes that there are other things that are bigger than him, that he must realize that if he has what it takes to step up to the challenge and be a better person and actually do something for once.
Do something with yourself, boy.
Nice. And I do have to say, so far, one of the things you had mentioned was Scalia. You were talking about Scalid, and actually, we are talking about Toothless and just expressing themselves. And I find so far, I found that you're doing that quite well. You get a feeling of the personality of the dragon as it goes along, and it's actually very nicely done. I get the feel. I feel like I'm getting to know this creature, even though he does not talk. I mean, you do get the interior dialogue a bit, which, and it's just a very nice touch altogether. So, I definitely give you kudos for that.
Yes, thank you. It's definitely one of my favorite scenes to write is from his perspective. And for the longest time, I was trying to figure out why it seemed to flow better. And I think it was because of the lack of dialogue that I have to rely more on just creative narrative. And it really helped my skills as a writer to be able to convey emotion and character without speaking. And so I'm actually going to try and experiment with the sequel where I will write a scene without dialogue first and then add the dialogue later if it's needed, to see how that works out for me. Because another author buddy of mine has tried it and said that their writing has changed for the better in most aspects whenever they tried that. So that's an interesting experiment that I'd like to experiment with myself.
Ah.
That is interesting. I don't know if I've ever heard of that, but yeah, that could be a very interesting experiment. So
Yeah,
you'll have to let us know how that turns out.
I will.
I can definitely see, and I have coached some of my book clients in the past whenever they were really struggling with helping, basically grounding their reader in a scene or something, and they would just be flying through dialogue. And it's like, okay, I don't even know where everybody's at. I don't know what they're doing. So I want you to, instead of focusing on any dialogue, we'll go back and add that in. But for now, I want you to just focus on working in the scene and working in their movements. And because, at the beginning over here, they were on a spaceship and now they're on a planet, or, whatever. And we didn't see any of that transition. And so
I am guilty.
I am too. It is a common mistake to make. So you get to flying through like dialogue and stuff, or get so wrapped up in other things that in your brain it happened, but it didn't happen on the paper. So
Yes.
it is good to like go through, don't focus on any of the dialogue and focus on the scene, what is happening outside of that dialogue. And it really just helps the author check themselves and make sure that they're making it flow smoothly. And then it also just helps them make sure that they're not overburdening the reader with a whole bunch of fluff.
Yes, and that's what my copy editor pointed out that was extremely valuable to me, was just constantly reminding me, set the scene. Where is everybody and what are they doing? Because a lot of times, for the sake of drama, I'll just jump the reader into, a conflict of dialogue, but we can't envision where they are. But in my mind, but it didn't all make it to the paper. So
right, exactly.
Remembering that the scene is a very important part of story writing and storytelling, because that puts a whole new element of allowing the reader to visualize more clearly what's going on and therefore be more immersive and not be pulled out of the book so easily.
Yep. If they know where the characters are at, it makes it easier for the brain to follow that who, what, when, where, why pattern that it likes to follow. And so it just tacks it on a lot better for that. Do what?
No, I was going to say, do you ever act out parts of your scenes if it's ever like requiring physical combat or such? I always ask this question.
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay.
It's a little bit embarrassing when somebody walks into the bedroom and I have a broomstick and I'm like, I'm just making sure that I can pull out a sword if I'm in this position. That's all.
That's great.
And the answer is no. I have to change the character's position in case you're. I go away.
That's great. Yes, I have some practice swords around the house, and I've been known to be sitting there and acting out scenes. It's definitely fun, but you're right. When you get caught and people look at you like, what are you doing?
Yeah, and faces too, trying to figure out how to describe a facial expression. You're sitting there like
Yes.
making face, and everybody's like, "What are you doing?" I'm making a face in real life. I'm sorry.
Yeah, right. Or
Yeah,
better yet, when you actually do that and you're saying, well, wait, what's the word you use to describe that face? Wait a second, you know? How
Yeah.
do you, how
Yes.
do you actually say that?
Exactly.
I keep a mirror next to my writing space so that if I do need to create a facial expression or describe it, I can look at that mirror and I can build it myself on my face, and then take that, do it in as few words as possible, and describe to the reader the facial expression.
That's a good idea.
It's not bad.
So we have about 3 minutes left, and I just want to remind the audience that all of Hannah's book links, all of her social media links, they're all going to be in the description of this video. So please make sure you go check her out. She also has a website, and you can go sign up for her newsletter there. Her newsletter is awesome. So definitely check that out. Sign up for her newsletter. You get lots of good updates about her books, and you can also have opportunities to sign up to be a the word just left my brain, but reading the book before it's out, an advanced reader.
Yes, there you go. That is the word.
So there's lots of great opportunities for that. And then definitely just, if you can, please get on social media, find her there, and share some of her stuff, because that helps out an author way more than you know. And if you pick up one of her books, definitely leave a review, because that is the nice thing to do for an author.
Yes, and the Thornbrill is debuting on October 17th, so be sure to check that out as well.
Yes, that cover is
bio on as well.
That is a gorgeous cover. And I think we're going to have you back a second time, because I never got to ask the question of what's next for Hannah, but we'll have to leave the audience hanging on that.
Yes, yep, we'll have to, because we're running out of time here. So is there anything else you want to leave with the audience real quick, Hannah? Anything at all?
I would just say that if you have a story to write, definitely write it, because I think there's a statistic that says that over half of people who say have a story never write it. So there is an audience out there waiting for your book. They just don't know it yet unless you give them something to read.
There you go. There you go. And we live in a wonderful age where it is not that hard to get your story out there. So
no,
it is awesome. All right. And so definitely check out the description, all of the links, show Hannah some support, and we will see you guys in the next video.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome.
Absolutely.
Thank you for being here. This is fun.
Been a pleasure. Yep.
Bye.